Good day, all. Welcome to the Institute of Critical Study of Society Sunday morning program of June 20th. My name is Raj Sahai, who, along with June Rule and 6 other members of the program committee, organize our programs. Yesterday was Juneteenth, commemoration of the day in 1865. Of the day in 1865 when the institution of slavery was legally abolished in the United States. But we know slavery will remain in other forms until a social revolution abolishes it worldwide, starting in one or a few countries. The burdens of history on our collective shoulder: patriarchy, caste, racism, organized religion, and oppressors' nationalism, all of which support the economic system that tries to dehumanize us all and crushes us all, or tries to. That is capitalism. Following the overthrow of which a true liberation will be possible, we believe, when we begin transition starting with socialism to a communist society worldwide. So the opinions expressed in our lectures, including that of mine here, our workshops and our publications, are only those of its authors. We are united, however, in our respect for the work of Karl Marx, who in his 11th thesis on Feuerbach said, the philosophers have explained the word in different ways. The point, however, is to change it. So the Institute of Critical Study of Society was at Niebel Proctor Marxist Library, where we will return. And it was formed in 2004 to preserve Marx's heritage, as well as to support struggles for racial and gender equality and for socialism. As many regulars of ICS Sunday will recall, a young Marxist intellectual from Kolkata, India, who spoke in our forum, described the present stage of capitalism, the neoliberal stage, as a stage of irresolvable contradictions. Its main feature, according to him, is that production and circulation acquires increasingly fictitious character. The young intellectual from Kolkata is Vasudev Nath Chaudhary. It is increasingly sold in the futures market, the production. That is his thesis, but its ground effect is acquisition of all common natural resources forcibly from people of the world and facilitated by new laws that promise prosperity for all, but forces austerity and wage slavery for all who produce actual wealth. Sorry about that. And in addition, so this is they do to the people who actually produce the wealth, and all the while destroying the ecological base of society, polluting our common space which sustains life. So we are facing a grave crisis there. So today we are very fortunate to have a team of documentary filmmakers led by Bedabrata Pain, and whose other members are Rajashik Tarafder and Sristy Agrawal, also Rumela Gangopadhyay. All of them are part of this effort to produce a film called Deja, which has been filmed, for which they traveled across the Midwest in the middle of winter, 6,000 miles in the Farm Belt, and talked to small farmers and saw the effect neoliberal laws that were brought in starting with 1980s Reagan change, how its impact was. So he will be talking about the topic of their talk today is Deja, which is the name of the film, Capital in Neoliberal Stage, how it has destroyed your small farmers. And then the question arises, will it do the same in India? Because India has some new laws. Sorry. So Bedabrata Pain, he will also known as Bedo, which is what I like to call him, worked as in the NASA as a scientist, and he did a tremendous amount of research work there. Later elected to do the work in public interest. This is filmmaking. He produced an award-winning movie titled Chittagong in 2012, which is a feature film based on an actual event of history, which was the armed revolutionary attack against the British colonials led by a school teacher and his teenage students in Bengal in 1830. He will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll follow with have an intermission after that, and then we'll have discussion session in which Sristy and Rajashik and maybe Ruma will have comments, as well as Amit Singh, who's actually been to the protest sites in India. He lives in India, but he's right now in the United States. So before he begins, I'm going to show you a 2-minute clip of the movie, which he has provided me a link for. So I will go there now, if you'll bear with me for a second. Can you see it?
You need to unmute.
Culture
Yes.
more efficient. And you tell farmers you can be professionals. You can be,
Good, we are seeing it. Yes, we are seeing it. Thank you.
Be a business person, a businessman. You're going to be really successful.
I think right now the only businesses in town are three bars. There's a gun shop and the feed mill and the funeral home. Entire state of Wisconsin used to have 143,000 operating dairy farms. I think the last count, there's only 6,000 total left. There used to be 27 operating farms on that circle. There's only one left out of 27.
This is a 12,000 head facility, had 14,000 cattle in it because I couldn't sell them. I had by all of the packers. I simply called the Secretary of Agriculture, Dan Glickman, at the time. I said, why don't you enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act? And he said, well, Mike, in this modern age of globalization, we need big companies that can do business globally. And I said, whoa, what about the small guy? What about the farmer feeder, the family operation? Well, Mike, it's get big or get out.
I should be able to feed myself and my family. I should be able to live just running my farm.
We need to come to the realization and admit that it didn't work.
Okay, so with that, please welcome Bedabrata Pain and Beda go.
First of all, thank you very much, Raj, for inviting me, and thank you everybody here for giving us the time. And I really, it's a great honor to be speaking at the Marxist Library and talk about the work that we have been doing. Before I begin, I want to mention that what you saw was it's not even a trailer. But more than that, because of Zoom, everything becomes kind of this stuttering kind of a thing. So when you actually see the documentary, it's not in this stuttering way. That stuttering thing is thanks to Zoom, not us. So that's one of the things I wanted to make clear. But you have. Unfortunately, Sristy hasn't joined us. I think she's having some problem joining in there. But Rajashik is here, and the other person who's not Ruma but Rumela Gangopadhyay, she's also here. She 4 of us actually took the trip, this kind of 6,000, 7,000 mile trip through Midwest from Los Angeles. We drove there because, I think that kind of brings me to why we were doing this documentary. I think that backdrop, or the rationale is also very important. So yesterday was Juneteenth. Today's a June 20th. That's also a very important day for us, that is Indians, because exactly 30 years ago to this day, India ushered in this new economic policies, this privatization and liberalization. On June 20th, 1991, IMF gave a $2.2 billion loan to India because India was facing a crisis at that point where it did not have foreign currency reserve more than 3 weeks of imports. Now, as they say, every crisis is an opportunity. So that was the time when this IMF loan came, and along with them came conditionalities of what needs to be done, which was opening up the economy, opening up trade, opening up investment. Now, you should not think of that this was a poor country submitting to or being subjugated by IMF. Far from it. It was the intention of the Indian big bourgeoisie, the big corporates, to open up. And this crisis provided them with the opportunity to unleash it. Because, very briefly, sidetracking, India was called under Nehru's socialistic pattern of society. I mean, most of you may not know that socialistic pattern of society, that entire docket was written by, who? By Tata and Birla. Tata and Birla are like Warren Buffett's of today, the big monopoly bourgeoisie. They, in 1947-48, came up with the idea that we would have this so-called socialistic pattern of society, build public sector, because Indian bourgeoisie did not have the capital to develop India. And it was sold that we are building socialism in India for the working people. And it was even written there that at one point of time, Indian capitalists should come to own that, everything that was built with public money. Capitalism, right? I mean, that's how capitalism is. And that's what started happening from 1991. It's not that was the first time, but very demonstratively things started in 1991, which was, as I said, supposed free market, opening up, liberalization. And, it's supposedly bringing this big middle class market, some 300 million people, and so on and so forth. What happened? We know what happened. Thomas Piketty has done a great study on this. He showed that, and I have the graph, unfortunately, I don't want to show the graph here because it would take too much time, but I'll just tell you that if you look at the numbers till 1980s or so, the top 10% had maybe 30-35% of national income. The middle 40% would have about 45% of income. We're talking about the middle class, which is supposed to have benefited from this liberalization. When liberalization began, 1991, and he shows the mid 40% income dropped, and the top 10% income rose. So when, now coming to today, that Prime Minister Modi, as he has embarked on to kickstart these Indian economic reforms, which were kind of stalled for a while, and he embarked on this stuff of privatization, of bringing in investments, of liberalizing labor laws. That's another big topic to talk about. And these farm laws, these 3 farm laws. I'm sure you had a session on this, I believe, so you know at least some of it. It wouldn't have fooled us that who is this going to benefit. But as usual, it is being said that these farm laws are going to benefit farmers. In fact, what is being said is not very unknown, that, we are going to open up, this is going to bring prosperity, it's going to bring price discovery, it's going to allow more bargaining power to farmers. It will give more opportunity to farmers. It will open up new markets. We all have heard this many times before. So at that time, when we started, we always, as scientists, we always like to study something before we comment. So as I was studying, it became very, very clear that in the last 4 decades, what has happened in this country, that is the USA, is exactly what these 3 laws are going to enable. Now, I'm not the first to talk about it. There are others who have talked about it as well. But it became very, very clear that it's so crystal clear that it's no longer a matter of speculation what these laws are going to do. Whether opening up of Indian agriculture will benefit farmers or will benefit somebody else, whether this contract farming will benefit small farmers or it will enrich somebody else at the cost of them, or taking away MSP, minimum support price, which is like parity price in this country, will unleash new prosperity to farmers. It's not a matter of speculation. There is hard evidence in front of us. This country called America, this country of the land of milk and honey, the quintessential opportunity society. So that's where our documentary began. So we said we must chronicle what has happened, and Rajashik and Sristy contacted a large number of small farmers in the Midwest, and Rumela came along, and 4 of us embarked on this journey and said that let us talk to them, let us try to understand. Of course, side by side, we also studied to see what the effects are, and I'm going to talk about some of our findings today. I think it's going to take a little bit more than half an hour, but Raj, you made the mistake of giving a Bengali a mic. That's the worst thing you can do. So stop me at any point of time. So I think I might begin with the end. That is what is the conclusion. The conclusion is actually extremely simple. It's kind of Marxism-Leninism 101. That free market, left to itself, or not left to itself, naturally, that is economically, and unnaturally, that is politically, will always give rise to monopolies. Number 2, interests of monopoly, or the big corporates, always run counter to the interests of the rest of the society, whether it's a working class, whether it's farmers, small business, or even professionals. Professionals are the last people to realize that, but so be it. And a corollary to that is what we also realized is how the desperation of rural America has led to the rightward turn of vast parts of rural America. And that's something we can go in the discussion. And this is something that was talked about even in 1983. All right, so maybe I will begin with just some ideas of the devastation that rural America has faced, because I think a lot of people are not aware of it. I'm sure you probably are aware of it, but just in case you're not. There were, in 1950s, there was some 23 million farmers. Today, there is less than 2 million. 40% of population used to live in 1950s in rural area. Today, it's less than 20%. Like India, very interestingly, small farms make up 90% of all the farms that exist. But they account for a very small percentage of total sales. In fact, if you look at the total sales, in 1950s, the small and medium farms put together would make about 50 to 52% of the total production, by sales. In 2007, that dropped to 15%. Today, it stands at about 10%. So 90% of the farms make 10% of the sales. So this is immediately, I think, will tell us what is going on. But it's actually even more devastating than that. Today, what is being seen is that, especially in the last decade, there has been a huge reduction in the farm income. In 2020, USDA, which by the way, the farmers call it USDA Inc., because they call it a satellite office of the big corporates. According to USDA data, household income from farming activities stands at minus, that is negative, $1,840. Median household income from farming is minus $1,840. This is the condition of American farming, small farming. Today, compared to 1980s, only 14% of a dollar that we spend at a grocery store or a consumer spends goes back to a farmer. On the other hand, the cost of purchasing seeds have gone up by 200%. One of the farmers told us, and I was surprised, that while the cost of producing wheat has gone up by 200% in the last couple of decades, the cost of wheat today at the farm gate, what a farmer sells, is the same as it was during the Civil War. I was surprised. I checked it, and he's correct. 80% of rural counties have seen population declines. 99% of jobs are created in urban areas. So 1% of jobs get created in urban areas. So there's actually depopulation of the countryside. Let's talk about debt. Today, the farm debt stands at about $425 billion. Just shy of the record that was reached in 1981 when President Reagan came to power. What am I missing? Suicides. That's actually one of the first things we came across. And it's also something that most people are not aware of. I mean, we hear of suicides in India, and farm suicides are a most common thing that one hears about in India. But in America too, one of the biggest sectors that has been hit today is the dairy sector, where large number of suicides are happening. Over a period, suicide rates of farmers are 4 to 5 times that of national average. And USDA has been playing a very dirty trick trying to hide this number. And we can go into it, how they're hiding. We looked into it. But that's a fact. We heard heartbreaking stories, including one of the stories of a small banker committing suicide because he could not bear the fact that he had to send, repossession notice to small farmers. The small banks also, or bank officials also come under attack or under threat from the big banks that, sitting in Chicago or Manhattan that control them. So this is the story of the devastation. And you heard in the 2-minute introduction that you saw that one of the farmers, Joel Greeno, talk about the reduction of dairy farms in Wisconsin. I mean, there were 34 million dairy farms but in 1980 when President Reagan came to power. Today, that is dropped to 34,000, a 10 times drop. This is the backdrop. So the question really is, as one of the farmers told us, that how did we get here? And all the farmers we talked to kind of point to President Reagan as the beginning. And actually, to be honest, the beginning happened even before that. But anyway, everything has kind of a mark that this is the marking point, and that marking point is Reagan, who very demonstratively talked about free market, talked about deregulation, taking away, creating big monopolies, ending parity. So President Reagan arrived as a crusader for free market, opening up agrarian economy, saying farmers must compete with each other. That's how they're going to become rich, and so on and so forth. In fact, this notion started way back, even in 1953. The Secretary of Agriculture, I forget his name, he had said that farmers don't need don't need protection. They need a spurt of insecurity. We should keep them on their toes. That's the way they're going to make it big. But what happened from 1980s onwards? Of course, we know that the neoliberal stage was the time when capitalism threw off or shed its social democratic skin, which it was holding from, after the World War II, when faced with the prospect of communism spreading all over, capitalism had put on this social democratic kind of a garb. By 1970s, that garb was gone. And it was back to the old days of going all out. And the way they went all out, and again, it's not something that should be any difficult to understand. So it's always mind-boggling to hear somebody say, "Oh, open up the market and farmers will benefit." When has it happened that in a tank of a lot of small fish, you throw in a big fish, and the small fish become prosperous? It doesn't happen. So as they talked about again is that there's three kind of things that these way the small farms were put at a disadvantage. First of all, the big ag, the big corporations came and took out competition. We know it. Closed their competitions down, bought them up. They will go to the grocery stores and buy up aisles. So that's also a local distributor cannot put its goods over there. So therefore, they cannot buy it from the farmers and so on. They reduce the farm gate price. So the farmers go at a disadvantage. And I'll come to that parity issue in just a bit. The third thing they did is they took the elevators away. So in this country, I didn't know this. What we used to call in India granaries are called elevators. I'm sure you know that, but I didn't know that. So throughout rural America, a lot of these elevators were co-op owned. So farmers would come together and create these elevators so that they can store the grain, so that they don't have to sell the grain at the harvest time, which is when you get the lowest price. And by the way, in India, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to take those granaries away so that the farmer is forced to sell at the harvest time, which is also the time when he's under maximum pressure because all the investments that he has made, all the creditors are breathing down their neck. So in this case, these granaries were taken away by the big corporations. They were taken away and made idle. So now what happens is the small farmer has to pay freight and take their grain to a big elevator that has been made by, let's say, ConAgra, one of the large, big corporations, big agro businesses, put it in their granary, putting the small farmer at a huge disadvantage. So as one of the farmers said that, we have choice. We have ConAgra West and we have ConAgra East. So the granaries are gone, these elevators are gone, and along with them are gone the small farmers. So this is purely through economic means, and I'll talk about the political means in just a second. That monopoly power grew to the point where today in the beef industry, four corporations control 84% of beef market, 66% of hog market, 61% of poultry market, 70% of soybeans market, 80% of corn, 90% of milk supply by two companies, Dean Foods and Dairy Farmers of America. Grain trading by four companies, 90%, Cargill, ADM, Bunge, Louis Dreyfus. Pesticides, three companies, Bayer, Syngenta, and Corteva, 86%. Seeds, Bayer, Monsanto, ChemChina, Dow, DuPont, 70%. Equipments, John Deere, CNH, and AGCO, these three companies, pretty much all of it. This is the level of monopoly control that today exists in the rural America. And the record profits for these ADMs and Bunges of the world and record devastation of small farmers. Of course, I don't mean to say that monopoly control exists only in farm sector. I mean, you look around, just look around. 66 companies control 90% of media, everything that you consume on TV or on newspapers. 3 hospital systems control 77% of patients. 3 drugstores make up 99% of all that we purchase. 3 healthcare companies provide us all the health care. Whirlpool controls 80% of all appliances. 5 defense contractors pretty much control the entire market. Semiconductors, we know 1 or 2 companies only. Enterprise software, 2 companies, Oracle and SAP. I mean, I can go on and on. Monopoly is a fact of life, and that's what has happened as a major part in this neoliberal stage. It is very interesting that free marketeers would always see monopoly and market distortion whenever there is a social welfare issue, whenever there is a government trying to provide a service, or whenever there is a public sector. Oh, they say, oh, it's very monopolistic, monopsonistic, and all these names. But they never see that free market will give rise to private monopolies. That's something they always like to hide. That's when comes job creation, innovation, and whatever not. Fact of the matter is that today, these monopoly companies all over in every sector, not only as a captive market, but they're hugely subsidized by the state. In fact, today's capitalism will not survive a day had it not been for the kind of subsidy that they get from the state treasury. And we see that in farmlands as well. By the way, even as we in neoclassical economics books, you talk about perfect competition and all kinds of stuff where they hide commonplace stuff, common sense stuff under these mathematics. They know exactly what to do. Goldman Sachs, for instance, published a research memo that advised their investors. Here's what they said. The investors should seek out oligopolistic market structures in which a smaller set of relevant peers face lower competitive intensity, greater stickiness, and pricing power with consumers due to reduced choice, scale cost benefits, including leverage over suppliers, and so on. In other words, they know that monopoly is the way to make maximum profit. But when it comes to the students being taught or the propaganda, which today it's called PR, it is called advertisement, it's about free market. It's about perfect competition. Economics, I say, is the business of hiding the obvious behind opaque and nonsensical maths. As Joan Robinson said that, and one of the farmers actually reminded us of that, is that one should study economics to know how they're lying to us. Something of that kind. The other side of the growth of the monopolies is, of course, a political power. Now, this is also this is why the question Reagan becomes important, and this is what we see even in India happening. So Reagan said, and I quote, "We are changing the ways we enforce antitrust or anti-monopoly laws. No longer are we going to seek competition for the sake of competition. No longer are we going to seek to distribute power to prevent the concentration of power. What we are going to do now is we are going to allow people to concentrate power because it is going to be more efficient and it's going to help the consumer in the country. Because of the power that's concentrated, these guys are going to use it to drive down the price of what we buy at the store." A lie from beginning to end. But this is what they talk about. What was done was a complete change of how monopoly or anti-monopoly antitrust is to be interpreted. The antitrust laws that existed in America before that, and it has all kinds of problems, we can go into that. But it was based on saying that if there is an entity coming that is taking away competition, here's this judge called Judge Bork. He changed the interpretation to saying that no, it's all about consumer welfare. So if consumer welfare is satisfied, or if consumer welfare is increased, then it's okay to let big guys come and take control. And it became a thing in Supreme Court. So as a result, under Reagan, slowly all the antitrust enforcers were taken away, and it became more difficult for small producers to produce. There were more regulations on them, while the regulations became much more relaxed for the big guys. And this is what then complemented the natural tendency of free market to give rise to monopolies. In other words, economic power gives rise to political power, and they kind of go hand in hand in creating these monopolies. In fact, one of them told us a very funny story. One of the farmers told us a very funny story of how there is a revolving door relationship between USDA and the industry. There's this guy, Al Almanza. He was the head of food safety in USDA. And he allowed rotten meat, this is under Trump, allowed rotten meat of JBS to come into America, and it became a bit of a deal. So he resigned with full benefits, full pension and so on. And guess what he did? He joined and became the head of food safety of JBS, the very company he did not regulate. By the way, this is actually very, very common in the banking sector, the financial sector as well. Goldman Sachs, when they hired their presidents and vice presidents and so on, it's actually one of the things that you should go and serve in the government and then come back to us. And government also knows that. You will know that our state the Secretary of Treasury almost always comes from Goldman Sachs or Citibank. Pretty much. Let me come back to the other issue of land. Today, there is a situation where huge amounts of land is being owned by the richest. The largest farmland owner in America today is Bill Gates. And this is something I did not know before we headed out there. And along with that, now the question is why? Along with that, something that has happened is the growth of absentee landlordship, where those who own land don't till the land. They have tenant farmers who till the land, and they may come into a deal. So what happens? Now, along with that comes the other question of subsidies. This is another thing that is always talked about. The farmers get so much subsidies. But if you actually look into it, who gets the subsidies? You would see that top 10% of the farms get 70 to 80% of all the subsidies. In 2018, 2019, this thing's called market facilitation loans and crop insurance. 80% of that went to the top farms. So what happens is it's a beautiful scam, by the way. So you own the land, your crop is protected by these insurances. You don't have to do anything. You lease the land out to your tenant farmer, you make money from that. And the investment is perfectly safe. If anything should go wrong, government will pick up the tab. So government, that is the people, take the risks, and the profit goes to the biggest of the guys. Sound familiar? This is how capitalism works. What exists, and this is what brings me to the point of parity, and I probably, how are we doing on time, by the way? Okay, I'll carry on.
You keep on going. You can talk up to another 15 minutes. If you
Okay,
like.
so in let's say 10 minutes, I will try to conclude.
Sure.
Let's bring in the question of parity, which is the other issue that is very relevant for India, because in India we have this minimum support price, and that the government is trying to take away. Minimum support price is kind of a guaranteed price for farmers. So in America, that came in the notion of called parity pricing, which came under Roosevelt in 1930s, Now, that was a time when capitalism was feeling the pressure because of their own problems, as well as the pressure of the communism had come in, and communism was capturing the minds of working people everywhere in the world. So capitalism also had to show that no, we can take care of you. So what it did in farm sector was it came up with this concept of parity. Parity pricing was that a price that a farmer should get for his produce such that their living standard would be similar to that in the urban areas. So the pricing would be done according to the cost of production, cost of living, and so on and so forth. And based on that, in the perishable areas, like in milk and so on, there was a floor price set so that anybody coming in the market, not just government, anybody coming in the market will have to pay that minimum price. It can go above that, but that's a minimum price. In the non-perishable commodities like grain, a different scheme was introduced called, and there's a relevance to this. It's called non-recourse loans. Now, the non-recourse loans are very, very simple. It's that you say that, okay, government will give you a loan at the end of your harvest, priced at the parity price of the grain. So if the price of the, say, corn is $3 per bushel, then I would be given a loan at $3 a bushel times the amount of bushels I have produced at a nominal rate for 6 to 9 months. So I have a time, so I can pay off my creditors and so on, so that I don't have to sell my grain right at the harvest. Remember, at the harvest, the grain price is the lowest. So I tide myself over, and then once the prices have risen, I can sell the grain out. So this is a non-recourse loan, which is a great way small farmers could benefit. What they did is, over time, they reduced this parity price. So farmer would still get the loan, but will not get as much money. Now, every time they did that, there would be a crisis. There would be a threat of collapse, a rural collapse. And government then have to put in more money. Like, to give you an example, President Reagan, before he came to power, between 72 and 81, every year there were $3 billion of farm assistance that was given. He took away parity and all that. And he was forced to put in $34 billion because the American economy was in a threat of collapse. So this is what happens. But the point is that they take away parity, and as things become worse, they give you a little bit of money by way of subsidy. It's a beautiful scheme. So you depress the price, which benefits the big corporations because now they can buy grain at low price. Farmers are given a small amount of subsidy, which is nothing. They're denied their parity price and given a small amount of subsidy in return. And then with that subsidy, the government goes on saying, oh, the farmers are on welfare. They're leeching the whole society and so on and so forth. But the real beneficiaries of this is the big corporation, which is getting now grain at lower and lower and lower price. Till it came to 1996 with this beautiful term called freedom to farm, which, by the way, the farmers called it freedom to fail. The parity price was completely removed. The shell was gone. What they did with this money, but there was this money sitting in the government, which was given as loans, right? So non-recourse loans. That money was now reprogrammed to the biggest corporates in form of subsidies, in form of market facilitation loans. So let me say this, it's a beautiful scam. So there was money set aside for parity pricing so that you could get this non-recourse loans. Parity went away. The money didn't go away. The money was now reprogrammed for market facilitation loans, which the small farmers won't get. Why? Because parity was based on cost of production. Market facilitation is based on amount of land you own. So it's a beautiful way of reprogramming the money where you change one notion that I'm not going to give you money based on your cost of production, based on how much land you own. So small farmers get nothing. Big farmers get everything. And that's what has been behind this notion of trying to buy more and more of land. It's a great, safe investment. So you see how, starting from parity, with the same amount of money, you actually transfer the money from small farmers to the corporate agriculture. under the same rubric. Nothing was changed. CCC, Commodity something corporation, I forget the exact name, CCC, was handling the loan earlier. They're handling the loan now. Earlier, the money used to go to small farmers. Now the money goes to the big agribusinesses. Beautiful system. I marvel at capitalism. How they sell scam as the biggest innovation. All right. So that was on the parity side. Let me just finish with the contract farming, because that's another element that very few people know about, and also something that is being pushed in India as something that farmers will get an assured price and so on. By the way, everything is sold as a great advantage to farmers, right? I mean, so in India, contract farming is being sold as something that is going to give farmers assured price. Now, who would want an assured price? Well, except that then nobody's telling what the assured price is. Is the assured price here, or is the assured price here? So this brings us to contract farming. This is most clearly seen in livestock industry, where you have these hogs or poultry being confined in these things called CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, which causes an ecological disaster. These animals are packed in these tin buildings. I won't go into the ecological stuff right now, because that's yet another much bigger topic. I'll just talk about the human tragedy. What happens in these is that the farmer is given a contract by the big corporates. Who owns the hog and the poultry? The farmers don't own the hog or the poultry. Farmer has to get a loan to make these buildings where these hogs and poultries would be housed. He's responsible for taking care of the animals, but the feed is provided by the agribusiness. Once they have matured, the big agribusiness comes and takes them away, and then they use it in their integrated system. Now, what happens is that for the small farmers, there is only one or two maximum guys who would give you such a contract. So very quickly, the cost of the contract or the price the farmer gets is reduced, where you can barely make ends meet. On the other hand, he has all the risks. He has taken that huge $1 million loan. And by the time you pay up that loan, they come and tell you, you have to make some changes to your system. We need a better ventilation system. So put in $1 more $1 million. So the farmer is tied. He can't do anything else with that land, because that land quality has tanked. And there is this building, and that's it. So he's stuck with his land, he's stuck with this loan, he's stuck with a horrible contract out of which he can't get out, because if he speaks out, these big corporations will come and tell you, we'll bankrupt you. They'll tell, as one of them said, they'll tell you to your face. So a farmer, all of a sudden, has almost become a serf. You talk about capitalism, rescuing the world from feudalism. It's almost capitalism in today's stage is bringing back feudalism. So, look at the beautiful thing. This entire loan is again guaranteed by the government. So look at a Tyson. He has no risk. They make no investments. All the investment is made by the farmer. They reap all the benefits because you have depressed the price of the contract. If anything should go wrong, if they lose any money, then the banker or Tyson, government will come and pay you the money. So government takes the risk. So the risk is taken by the government and the farmers. The profits belong to the big corporates and, of course, the banks. So this is how American farm landscape in last 40 years have given rise to big ag controlling pretty much everything from farm to fork. Farmers' price share has gone down, as I said, from 50 cents to $1 to 15 cents, 15 cents to $1. Number of farms have gone down, as I said, dairy farms from 34 million to 34,000. In the contract land, as I said, pretty much all of poultry is on contract. 90% of hog farmers are on contract. No independent hog farmers almost aren't there. The same thing is happening in the cattle. There is a beef industry. Let me finish by one more thing. You talk to these ideologues of this farm law changes. The word they would use always is efficiency. Oh, we want more efficiency. Sounds great. Why shouldn't we have more efficiency, right? Wrong. Efficiency for what? I know. Look at this. In America, even during 1930s, there was problem of overproduction. There was not underproduction. So why would you want to increase efficiency? For what? You're already producing enough. You're actually cutting back production. You need to cut back production. So if anything, you would need de-efficiency rather than inefficiency. Look at in India. We're talking about efficiency. India is food sufficient. It's another thing that most Indian people don't have enough money, don't have enough income to buy food. But in terms of production, India is food sufficient. So why this efficiency? So behind this myth, this fable, this lullaby of efficiency is that big corporates want to make money. That's what they sell to us as efficiency. They said that price of food will become cheaper. Has it? I give the statistics all the time. And it's one of the things that you talk to working class people, they will tell you food is not cheap. Here is a number. In last 4 decades, just in dollar terms, food prices have gone up by 220%. Now, that itself doesn't mean anything. The question is, how much has the income of people gone up by? If you look at the income of 90% of Americans, it has gone up only by 25%. Food prices have climbed up 220%. Even the top 1%'s income has not gone up by 220%. It's gone up by some 158%. It's a huge number, but still not as much as food price have gone up by. And they keep on telling us food is cheap. So I hope I have taken you down the journey of what we found, which is, as I said right in the beginning, that it has enabled Big Ag to monopolize the market, to take control over our lives, run away with a bonanza of profit, leaving small farmers in desperate conditions and cheating us consumers, the eaters as they're called, of good quality food at a decent price. I didn't even talk about quality of food. That's another issue. And this is what I think people of the world need to know. Indians need to know, because Indians are being told this 40 years of experience that I talked about in America is the way forward for America. In America, as we said, the number of farmers were 40% of the population. In India, that's 70% of population. So I wanted to bring us back to the idea that monopoly today is not in the interest of any single element of the society. So that's where let me end, and I think we will begin. There are lots of questions it has brought up. In fact, as we drove back, one of the things one of the farmers said kind of stayed with me, and I think I would throw this out, and perhaps this is something that we can discuss. He said that, what follows agri is culture, not business. And this is something that we should think about, because we communists also have our experience with how to organize agriculture, and maybe some of them also need to be revisited. So, shall I stop here?
Okay. Well, it's your choice. You have used up your time. So thank you, Bido. We are going to have a little intermission in which we'll make some announcement, 5 to 7 minutes here. And so, Jean, do you want to go ahead and make the announcement for the programs, upcoming programs, please?
Yes, thank you. And that is exactly what I want to do. Because we have such a great program. Again, Raj managed to set this up, but Norman Finkelstein, I think everybody knows who he is. He will talk on Gaza, Palestine, Israel in the shifting sands of US and world politics. And if you need to know more, it's on our webpage, icssmarks.org. But it's going to be a superlative program and urge people to enjoy that. And then following that, we decided not to have a program scheduled for July 4th. But we urge people to take time off and read, to think about the question, what to a wage slave is the 4th of July? And as you know, that was Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech some time ago. So anyway, well, keep in touch, check our webpage for our upcoming programs. And thank you so much. That was such a great program and looking forward to our discussion. And I think we need to go back to Raj or to Richard.
Yeah, Richard, please go ahead, make your announcement, and then I will take over.
Thank you. Well, this is the money part of our program. We do need funds for the for our work, and I posted in the chat. I'm in the process of posting in the chat information, some information on how you can send some money to us. Well, it doesn't seem to work, but I'll oh, here it is. You can either through a check or preferably through PayPal. It's the most non-hands-off way to do it. So, and if you, with the checks, many people send us checks through their bank bill pay, and that's a very convenient way. And the last way is Patreon, and we very much appreciate those contributions in the past and the ones in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So we are now going into our question and comment period. What I'd like to do is to ask Rumela and Rajashik to add anything they want to add at this point to what presentation Bedo made. And then I will ask Amit. And then everybody else who has a question or a comment, please raise your hand. And everybody here knows how to do it. Mehmet, can you explain how to raise the hand on the phone as well as on Zoom?
Yeah, thank you for that, Raj. We'd like to keep the discussion orderly. So we would like people to raise their hands when they want to ask a question or make a comment. It's going to be 2 minutes for those making comments and asking questions. But the guests, the hosts, presenters can go, beyond that 2 minutes. The way to raise your hand is if you have the latest version of Zoom, at the bottom bar at the very right, you have this reactions icon. If you go there, you're going to see the raise hand. You can also lower your hand that way also. I believe in the previous versions of Zoom, it was under the participants. So please take a look at it. Again, when you look at the participants, it was at the very bottom, but I think most people have the latest version. So go to reactions at the bottom on the right-hand side, click on it, and the raise hand is there. So on the phone, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't done it for some time. If you want to raise your hand, please do *9, and that's going to show us that you want to speak. And I believe, Raj, you're going to keep the stack. Is that correct?
Yes.
And let me then time, I will time the comments and questions so that we don't go too much above the 2 minute mark. Thank you.
Okay, so I will ask first, Rumela, would you please, would you like to speak at this point? Give you time that you need to add anything to Bedo's presentation.
Thank you so much, Raj, for giving me the chance. But I'm just a spectator here, so I'm enjoying the discussion. I will leave it to you guys. Thank you, though.
Okay. How
Why
about-
can't we see you?
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay,
Here,
there
I'm
you are.
sorry.
Okay. All right. So you're in Calcutta?
Oh, no, I'm in Seattle right now.
Seattle. Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So the next person I'll ask is Rajashik. Would you like to add something to the presentation?
Yeah, so hi, let me just ask Bedu one thing first because I was not here for a couple of minutes when I had to take a call. Bedu, did you cover the input side of the monopolies?
Just a little bit, but why don't you talk about it? And before that, Srishti is not here.
So Srishti, there is apparently some stormy weather in Sambalpur and she doesn't have internet.
So she's in India, and so she's the other person with us who cannot join. So I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's still some of the infrastructure that exists in some of these more rural parts of India is still very rickety. And so a storm usually knocks out some of the internet supply.
Yes, Raj, please go ahead, Rajshik. Please go ahead. I did not touch upon the input side as much. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll keep it very short. Primarily, one of the things that we learned from the farmers was that farmers get squeezed from both ends of the spectrum. One is when they go to sell, which is the market side, and one is when they go to buy the supplies for their input. So before all of this monopoly agriculture, the monopoly businesses took over the agricultural space, farmers could save their seeds. This is no longer possible. So now what they have is something called the terminator seeds, which basically means that these seeds, when they produce their crops, the seeds can no longer be saved in order to produce crops in the future. So the farmers have to go to this big businesses who technically, okay, we heard about monopolies in the output side. In the input side, one company alone controls 90% of the seed market globally. That's Monsanto. I mean, everybody has heard about them. And because they essentially own, and I mean, capitalism's best friend, private property exists, Monsanto owns the rights and to the DNAs of these seeds, by virtue of which you can, even if they do not have the terminator technology for a particular seed, they control the rights on those seeds, and the farmers therefore have to buy it on them, where the farmers are getting the rights to plant a particular seed for a year. So what that has done is that these two sides of monopolies have squished the farmers to have a bare bones existence. Not even that, as Bedu would have mentioned, that the mean income of the farmers after all of this is around minus $1,500 to minus $1,800. Now, the way subsidies act is just to keep this farmer solvent so that they keep on providing the labor force for all these big monopolies, essentially enriching them and keeping none for the farmers. Yeah, that's the one part I felt I didn't hear Bedu making, so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next person I'll ask is Amit. Amit Singh is based in India. He teaches at IIT Bombay, and he has gone to Indian farmers' protests several times. He also works with contract workers who come from the countryside. So Amit, would you like to add something to the presentation? And then we'll go to questions after that.
Thank you, Raj, and thank you, Bedu and the team. Every time I hear Bedu, I learn new things from him. So thanks a lot. So what I had decided to do was that I will just present you some pictures and some of the realities about the Indian farm sector. So can I just share my screen, Raj?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Let's see. I have to make you.
I already did, Raj. He can share the screen now.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, I mean, I visited the protest sites in the month of February, and let me just do this slideshow. Okay, so so what I felt was that I have been participating in lots of protest movements throughout the country. When I was doing my PhD in the US, I covered the Occupy movement as well. And what I found was very interesting that the Occupy movement, and then in the movement in Spain and Portugal, and then we had the movements in Middle East, in Egypt and across the Middle East. Protesters, and they all started after this 2008 great financial crisis. And the idea of all these protest movements, which I have been covering so far, is to occupy. So Occupy has been a great inspiration for the movements all around the world, although the working class participation was not as much as expected. However, in the neoliberal period, we can see that there is a push for even the small businesses to become proletariat and join the forces of the working class, and in a very distorted manner. So in this way, I regard all these protests very progressive and revolutionary also to some degree. So I went to cover those protest sites, and this is the picture that some of us have taken. So what these farmers are doing, you must have already read and seen in the media, that they started coming to the border areas of New Delhi, which is the capital of India, and they started occupying different border sites. The government, of course, did not allow to come them in the downtown of the city, in the middle of the city. So they started building tents, etc., on the borders of New Delhi. And you can see here that these are the kinds of trucks they brought from their farmland, and they have been bringing tents also. They have also made their trucks as a shelter home. So, for example, you can see here that there are various tents and a lot of protest posters you can see on different farm issues. The participation of women also is not very significant, but still the women protesters are also there. You can see these protest, the trucks, etc. They have been converted into mini shelter homes. There are also water purification sites, plants and sites you can find on the protest sites, some massaging things, etc. So they have converted the whole area into a mini sort of city itself. So if you go and visit these protest sites, they are 22 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide. They are very huge protest sites. In my memory of the last 38 years, I haven't seen such kind of protests happening in India. Very huge number of farmers, millions of farmers are coming together and joining these protest sites across the borders of New Delhi. Then you can see that they not only, are protesting, but they have to live also. They have been protesting from 26th of November. It is already more than 6 months. And they cook their food, they share their food. So, we call it langar. Which is like already a well-established practice in Sikhs Gurudwara. Sikhism is a religion which developed in India in medieval period. And then you have, so I also had the opportunity to eat some of their food, and this is the kind of food that they're serving. Okay, so you can see that if you go over to the site, you don't have to even, buy your food. The food you can get out of the protesters themselves. And they will give you chapati, which is like a flat bread, some rice, some vegetables, etc. And this is the kind of thing which, I was looking to see in Occupy movement, but on Occupy, it was mostly student and unemployed led. I did not see that, but here on the farmers movement, they have the resources to prepare and cook food, so they are feeding almost everyone. Most happiest people I found were the children, small children, rag pickers, who did not used to get any food 3 times a day, but because of these protests happening, a lot of them were very happy. And you can see that there are some basically stages also they have made, where from there they deliver morning and evening speeches. They also take protest rallies throughout the protest sites, demanding different demands, and having making a demand to end the farm laws and repeal those farm laws. They have also established, some of the organizations have come up and they have established libraries, as was the scene in Occupy as well. I mean, I saw lots of libraries in Occupy movement also. And then, yeah, so these are the children who are there. They are underprivileged kids who are getting educated also in those protest sites. So in a sense, what I found was that those protest sites are full of hope, energy, and a lot of things are happening, liberating experience, eating in commune, etc. Now, I will also talk a little bit about, the farm reality in India. So if you look at the Indian farming condition, the land holding size has declined right from, let us say, 1960s. So initially, the average land size was around 7 acres, but nowadays you can find the average land size is around 2 acres. And 85% of the farmers actually belong to people owning less than 3 acres of land. So in the US, the average farm size is around 400 acres of land. Here, 85% of the people own less than 3 acres of land. And then if you add 10% more people, you will go to the medium land owning class. And then the large landholders are those who own more than 2 hectares or more than 10 acres of land. They are almost around 7-8% of the people. So what we see is that the land is getting day by day, average land size is getting smaller and smaller. And this is resulting basically in their income. So as Bedo was explaining, that in the US, most of the farmers are going under debt because the income is less than the expenditure. And this is the same thing which is happening in India also. I mean, the landless to the middle farmers, you can see in this table that the total income is less than the consumption expenditure per month. So per month, they earn around 4,000 rupees a month, which is almost like $60 a month. And the consumption expenditure is more than that. Only for those farmers which are large farmers, large landholding farmers, owning more than 10 acres of land, only they are making some profit out of it. So minimum support. So while the land size is decreasing, the income is not catching up with the expenditure. The component of the non-food expenditure has shot up very highly. So food prices has also increased a little bit, as Veda was explaining in the US context. In India also, the food prices, they have increased, but non-food items, they have increased more rapidly than the food item expenditure. For example, education and health, two other basic commodities, they have shot up the roof. So, for example, you can see here in this particular table that education has increased 400% between 1980s and 2011-12. Similarly, the health has also increased 200%. Clothing has also increased, etc. The rent of the land has also increased. So, the non-food expenditure has been increasing, and that is resulting into a lot of pressure upon the income side. Now, so this is what farmers are saying in India, that in their opinion, and also the research, etc., they have established, there's a comparison between the regional 2 states, Punjab and Bihar, where the parity price or minimum support price, it increases the yield per hectare. So if you give the farmers incentive with the pricing system, then the productivity of the land also increases. It even protects the small and marginal cultivators. And if you have a larger income in agriculture, it will bring more purchasing power into the rural areas. And those purchasing power will result into more rural jobs and more rural expenditure. And this also leads into more investment. If you have lower returns in agriculture, it will lead to low investment in agricultural areas. And if 60-70% of the population are still dependent upon agriculture, that means agriculture should have been the top priority in India. But because of the neoliberal policies, etc., it is receiving less and less attention. Very similar to US model, Mexico model is also very same. So in 1927, just to have some comparison also between India and US, I also wanted to bring some experiences of Mexico. In Mexico in 1927, there was huge land reform done after 1918 revolution, and they declared land, water, and mineral rights as property of the people of Mexico. But by 1990 to 1992, under the advice of the World Bank, the communal land, they started getting converted into private property. So due to that land reform, by 1992, 103 million hectares land were distributed. But after 90s, those many communal lands started getting converted into private property. So there was an active policy to create land market. And the World Bank and IMF, etc., they come up with the idea that there is something called in economics comparative advantage advanced by Ricardo, that those states or those societies should produce those things in which they are most efficient. They should not produce things in which they are less efficient. So they said that, okay, Mexico has a tropical climate, so why don't you produce more fruits and vegetables rather than producing maize and corns? So there was a shift in agriculture from staple grains to fruits and vegetables. Similar things also happened in India. Rather than producing paddy and wheat, the emphasis was upon to produce cotton. And because of that, Maharashtra farmers are committing suicides because of that cash crop thing. And then in 1994, NAFTA was signed, and we know the experiences of NAFTA, how it has destroyed the livelihoods of farmers across Mexico. And that has resulted into migrant crisis in the US also, when those farmers now becoming landless, they start coming to the US in search of jobs. And yet there are too much immigrant laws. Recently, even Kamala Harris has pledged that, those immigrant stuff laws will be there, the border will be more secure, and so on and so forth. So Mexico experiences that the net employment in agriculture through all these pre-NAFTA and after NAFTA, if you compare, it fell down by 20%. And the same thing we are seeing in India also, because of a lack of incentives in agriculture. A lot of farmers are leaving the agriculture and joining the rural proletariat or an urban proletariat. So what are the lessons? I would say that P. Sainath is one of the most foremost speakers on agriculture issue in India. And he describes the agricultural crisis as a civilizational crisis. And we haven't talked about the question of ecology, but I think we should also in the discussion section introduce how it is disrupting the whole ecology, how it is depleting the soil of its nutrients, and how Marx already came up with this idea when he was writing Capital and having his own notebooks. He came up with the concept of rift between metabolism of the economic and social organization of the society and the nature, and he called it metabolic rift. One of the leading scholars who is advancing this idea is John Bellamy Foster, and Saito is a Japanese scholar who is also advancing this idea. The idea is that the whole chain of the soil cycle gets disrupted, because you are taking the nutrients out of the soil from the rural areas, but we are not feeding enough nutrients back into the soil. And for that, we have to be dependent upon fertilizers. Those fertilizers are again coming from the corporates and monopoly, which Vedo has talked about in a great detail. So I think this whole idea of ecological catastrophe that we are seeing in terms of food, in terms of input and output to the agricultural markets, we can discuss that. And especially in the COVID crisis, you can see that one of the reasons why this virus came into existence, because in China, most likely, because of the food sector, people are encroaching upon the forest, and the meat consumption has increased, and this metabolic rift that we see in Marxist literature, because of that, the new areas are being exposed to the human societies where viruses were already there, and now they're jumping on from bats to human beings. And we will see these attack of viruses more and more in the near future if we don't deal with the climate change and the food sustainability issues. So I stop at here, and then I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Could you end the sharing the screen, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so now we open for questions, and I will go to the raised hands as soon as he gives me a chance to
I'm
go.
gonna end the share screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the share screen, please. Thank you. Okay, so I haven't seen any raised hands as of now. Beto, I just while I wait for that, I want to tell you is that you remind me of my meeting first time Mrinal Singh, because he also liked to talk a lot. The movie that was 40 years ago, 45 years ago, actually.
I will take that as a compliment.
Yes, he's a great movie maker, and you certainly remind me of him. And so,
In fact, if you allow me, I mean, since
Yes,
we're waiting for them, I'll tell you my encounter with Mrinal Sen.
Yeah.
Chittagong, which I directed, won the national award and all that sort of stuff. So we had a special screening for him, organized for him, because by that time he was quite old.
Yeah.
For those who do not know, Mrinal Sen was one of the sort of the three great filmmakers from Bengal. Satyajit Ray, who's more celebrated, but equally powerful are Mrinal Sen and Ritwik Ghatak. And arguably, I probably were more influenced by the latter two than Ray. Not that Ray is any less of a stalwart. But so I was really looking forward to meeting Mrinal Sen. So he watched my movie, and a bunch of others. People asked questions. He was absolutely quiet. So I was responding to people's questions, and I was really feeling down that here is this man who I revere, and he's watched my movie and has got nothing to say. And the meeting ended, and he left the room, nothing still. And I was really disappointed at this point. And he goes to the elevator, lift as we call it in India. And he opens the door. I mean, the door opens, and somebody holds the door open for him. He gets in, and we're just about to say bye, and he grabs my hand and says, so you made the movie. And that told me right away how he appreciated the movie. That's all he said.
Yeah.
And he kept on holding on to my hand.
I saw his very first film. So who wants to ask the first question to him? I still don't see everybody's digesting.
Richard's got his hand up.
Okay, Richard, please go ahead.
Well, in point of fact,
I'm sorry, Richard, before you go, Raj, if you have the gallery view, then you can see the hands being raised there, or in the participants, the hands being raised.
I'll change it to gallery view now.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I was going to defer to my yeah, thank you very much. I think you've done a very good job of highlighting the one of the two century long dilemmas as far as industrial capitalism goes. One, of course, is the industrial side, and the other side is, as you've been exploring, is the agricultural side. And needless to say, there's been a lot of in Russia, the Soviet Union, and China, there's been a lot of approaches to how to deal with this. My question is that you came over and you interviewed U.S. farmers, and I think it was during Earl Butt's regime that something similar went down, and they did a survey of U.S. farmers, and basically the basis of the survey was, would you accept a cooperative kind of approach as exists in Canada? And I'm not suggesting that has all the answers. That's got problems as well. But nevertheless, did you explore that issue at all with the U.S. farmers? Was why they don't form cooperatives? Along the Canadian model. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you were very right. Earl Butz was the guy who started with this under Nixon, talking about get big or get out, and that's something that resonates even today. Even Sonny Perdue under Trump went and told dairy farmers who were committing suicide, get big or get out. So this is nothing new. It's a very interesting question about the cooperatives. From what we understood, the first point is that cooperatives did exist, and a lot of the elevators. Of course, we have to realize that in the farm sector, left movements have not been very strong. That's actually one of the points which, again, one of the farmers made very clearly that, and maybe let me go back to that, and I think that might elucidate a little bit of this point. So he said that in 1950s, as they were taking away these parity pricing, so I asked, why didn't the farmers protest? And so he said that, look, there was the right wing, which was already saying that privatization is the way to go, individualism, etc., etc. Remember, the Cold War period has already started, and anything that was kind of collective was being portrayed as communistic and as Soviet and Bolshevik and whatever have you. On the other side, those who were trying to organize the farmers, that is from the left side, they came under McCarthy and they were completely sidelined. So it's in this vacuum that allowed the corporates to come in and launch the first attack, which started in 1953 itself. As I said, the Secretary of Agriculture at that time gave this notion of freedom to farm. This 1996 law was actually a term that was used by him. Freedom to farm was the notion given that farmers need this a spurt of insecurity. They need competitiveness in order to produce better. So right from the get-go, because of the conditions under which this developed, collective efforts or cooperative efforts were already kind of on the receiving end. But that said, still there were large number of elevators, as I mentioned, were built by cooperatives. I mean, even in St. Francis, one of the small Kansas towns that we visited, the elevator, which has been now shut down by Big Ag, and ConAgra took it and shut it down. You can see it's written co-op. So these elevators were built through collective means of farmers putting together money. But then once the farmers don't make money, the upkeep money to keep up those elevators don't exist. And now the big corporations come in and say that, okay, I'm going to pay you this much. Are you in or are you out? And most of the time they say we are out. And little realizing at that point that once you lose the elevator, you are out of a huge resource. So I think the short answer to your question is that part of it is the American experience of organizing. I mean, it's actually a little bit of a problem that American left hasn't done a huge amount of work with American farmers. And the second part is that whatever did exist, kind of went away as big ag took over. One of the points the farmers made again and again, and which is why they were so also very keen to talk to us, is that the Indian protest has energized people worldwide, certainly in this country, because the farmers said that what we could not do, even though farmers came out in large numbers in 1970s and in 80s in Washington, D.C. to protest, and in small towns, and they always protested with tractorcades and so on. They could not organize in the way the Indian farmers have, and that's something that they find very inspiring. And I think it goes back to the sort of the culture under which I think America grew. So this is one of the things that they told us, that we thought, the farmers said in this country, one of the farmers at least, that we thought that we farmers alone can change it. We cannot. We actually have to reach out to a much wider network. And I think this is also a learning for Indians, that even in India, as powerful as the farmers are, they alone cannot affect the change. It has to be done They have to reach out, and that's where our documentary can play a role, because even in India, this rural-urban divide is very strong. Urban India has precious little idea of what's going on in rural landscape, and they are the most susceptible to all these balderdash about free market and opening up and so on. So I hope that our documentary actually makes a dent in that, so that next time the government comes and says, oh, free market will give you opportunity, at least some people should stand up and say, balls, that ain't gonna happen.
Can I add just a bit of anecdotal evidence to what Bedo said right now?
Yeah.
So one of the farmers we interviewed actually led one of the largest dairy co-ops in Wisconsin. Today, that farmer has much of his own equipments lying on the field in the hope that he's going to farm someday, because he doesn't have his herd, and he today qualifies for food stamps. That has been the experience of the cooperatives. As I said, it's an anecdotal piece of evidence. I was going to add something else, but I've sort of I think it has skipped my mind, so I'll wait for the next one.
No, go ahead if you want to know.
No, it just skipped my mind, so I'll lost my train of thoughts.
All right. Okay. I just wanted to, while I wait for somebody else's hand raised, I would say that in India, there is still the left movement, even though politically weak in the election, is not so weak in the organization. So, for example, CPIM has organized farmers and workers, and until a few years ago, they were the largest organized workers were under CPIM's organization of workers, the trade union, the federation. But now it is the right-wing trade union federation organized by BJP that is the largest. And among the farmers, I think they still have a lot of influence. So that's partly there, and partly the collective life in India has not disappeared, although it is under attack constantly by the propaganda of capitalism that individual is, you're strong, you can go ahead, what they call it, move ahead, or move ahead of others, whereas the collective moves together. So I think in India and here is a little different. Also, the conditions of life are quite desperate in India and poverty. So without collectivity, they won't even survive. So that's a physical, that's a materialist basis of that. But there is also tradition.
Right, I just to clarify, I was talking only about America. I wasn't
yes.
Richard's thing. I wasn't even going into India at all.
Yeah, no, you said that in India the farmers are better organized, and I'm saying the reason for that is the left is strong as far as organization of these farmers are concerned. They are not so weak.
That's cool.
Other questions or comments from our group?
You have to pay attention. Gene's had his hand up for a while.
Gene?
Yes, thank you so much. This was, there's so much in the talk and so many ideas that it's still hard to put them all together and wonder where to start. But let me just give my first reaction is, don't blame me. I voted for Barry Commoner. And for those young people here who don't know who Barry Commoner was, he was the founder and presidential candidate in 1980 of the Citizens Party that offered a thorough, he was the kind of formulated, one of the original people who formulated the idea of sustainable agriculture, sustainable society, and so on. And, he had a whole different vision about the way we should do things. And this was back in the 70s and 80s. And again, one of his points was that, subsistence agriculture by peasants is really more efficient in terms of calories produced and so forth than, this mass monoculture. But it's not as profitable. And the same theme goes on in other things. Go back to the Grapes of Wrath in the 1930s. We had a speaker here spoke on Brazil, the landless farmers movement there. So this is going on all over. And so I really appreciate your title, Deja Vu. We see this all over again and again. And so I guess there's so much there, but let me just ask about Kerala and the communist government there and how they're coping with this. Thank you.
Well, since the documentary is not about India as such, I think we should defer that question for a separate talk. But we can talk about it if you want. But I think it would be, I think opening up Indian agriculture and Indian agricultural experience will require a much wider talk. But setting up of the context. So I think I will defer that question if that's okay. But I should just point out one more thing, which is what you said, and I should have said this earlier. The title Deja Vu. In fact, one of the farmers actually said, "I'm the man from the future." For the American farmers, it is really deja vu. Everything that they were told will bring prosperity, will bring in all this great wealth, is exactly the same narrative that is being used in India right now. So that's why it's deja vu. But as far as the Kerala question goes, I think I will defer right now. But I think we can come back to it.
I want to ask.
Thank you.
Since I don't see another hand, I want to ask you something about the farmers in the USA. Is there somebody else who wants to ask first?
Yeah.
Richard Fallenbaum.
Oh, Richard, sorry. I didn't see your hand. Richard, go ahead, please. We're waiting for Richard.
We can't hear him, though.
Yeah, Richard, you need to unmute. Oh, he's on mute, but I think he may have
stepped up.
Yes,
so my question, let me ask in the meantime. The question is this, in America, they did
Richard Fallenbaum is sitting right there. Why isn't he able to be heard?
We don't know. So,
Raj, is he muted? Have you muted him? Can you unmute
go ahead, Richard, go ahead. Please,
I am unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Please go ahead.
Can you hear? Okay. I wanted to talk about labor itself. In California, there's been a transmutation and a proletarianization of agricultural labor in fruits and vegetables. And mostly it's an immigrant of sub minimum wage. I wonder if that process is going on in the Midwest and in the commodities that you talked about.
Short answer is absolutely. In fact, in the dairy sector, two things have happened. These big CAFOs, or this big organic farming, even organic dairy farming, which is often done in a non-organic way. Several elements of that would be non-organic and something would be organic, and that's what will pass. So they talked about how these big farms, a lot of them are dependent on small farmers who have gone out of business, and now they are just hauling manure, paying minimum, subsistence wages. And number two, immigrants who are working as laborers. That's one of the ways they keep the prices down. So one of the conflicts that's happening is that this big agribusinesses come in, create their CAFOs, get immigrant labor, pay them minimum wage, and that's how they can keep their prices down. And that, the small farmers now are at a disadvantage because they can't compete in price. They go out of business. And that's also created, or that's also transmuted into a fight between immigrants coming in and the small farmers, and contribute to this racism, xenophobia. Because we know always that racism is always about the big guys taking 99% of it, and make the small guys and the immigrants fight over the rest 1%.
And just to add one quick point on the prioritization of California, one of the farms we visited is, I think, around 100,000 acres large almond farm. They are the largest producer of almonds in the world. Can you guess how many workers work in their farms?
Thousands.
9 workers in total, all of them part-time. That's the prioritization of
Mechanization.
Wow. Wow.
I have to say, who else? Many people have not spoken. So,
Sharon has her hand up.
okay,
Raj.
Sharon.
I don't know why you can't see people's hands.
I see it now. I see Sharon and then Richard W.
Okay.
Sharon, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a few comments. Overall, as a Marxist, I think that there's no answer to this short of socialism. I think we all have to agree that unless the land is nationalized, there's no real hope for this. However, as a person who believes that there are progressive causes that need to be pursued as we also struggle for socialism in the long run, the question is, what are the progressive demands? That, to me, that's the question. And I think one way to look at it is that the small farmers and the workers, the landless workers who are employed on big farms, have a common interest. They may not see it, but it exists. And we should base progressive demands on that understanding, that at the same time that the petty bourgeoisie is driven into the working class, that is to say, small farmers are driven down to become working class, they have an interest in working together with working class people and employing people at a fair wage, and working out how they can continue their business against the big odds against them. The other thing I want to say is that when we think about what are progressive demands in the interim before socialism, we should not succumb to the notion that primitive agriculture is good. You know, I was in China in 2010, and one of the people that I remember the most that I met was a young woman who had just graduated from high school. And she told me that we were there in the summer, and she said she was preparing to go to Europe to pursue her education. And what was she going to study? She's going to study how to put robots in our fields. She was going to study digitized agriculture, if you will, the latest and greatest technology. She said, we need robots in our fields because otherwise, with a low birth rate in China and people moving from the countryside being encouraged to move from the countryside to the cities, there won't be enough people to work to provide food for all the Chinese people, even though the population is going down. And I smile when I think of her because I know she was right. And I know that the Chinese are moving in that direction. And that is a good thing. What's not a good thing is American idealists and utopians who talk about how great it was in Cuba during the special period when they couldn't afford gasoline for their tractors. They had more plows being pulled by animals, and somehow some people in Berkeley hippies came back from there and said that was a good thing. That is a really bad thing. The people of Cuba need robots in their fields, just like everybody else does around the world.
Just past 2 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to respond to that, Beda?
Sure. These are all very big questions. I don't want to go into China because I haven't studied that. So I don't want to comment on that. I don't want to like to comment on stuff that I haven't studied. But I want to go back to where I ended. And I think it's very important for at least for India and for America and for a large part of the world Question is, we want to use technology, but to what end? If there is a need for a technology, of course we will use it. But if the technology use becomes a proxy for increasing profit at the cost of somebody else, then what's the point? So, like this notion that is always pushed that we need efficiency. Now, I'm speaking specifically with respect to America, and I'm talking specifically with respect to India. Do we need this efficiency? Is there enough food being produced? In fact, very often this question of efficiency is used to hide that the reason why a lot of people push this efficiency is because they want to make the maximum profit. Because today we live in a capitalism which seeks not average profit, but maximum profit. And number two, they want to hide the fact that a large number of people cannot afford food, not because there is not enough food, but because this capitalism has deprived them of income. So very often this notion of technology as a solution, which you very often hear come from the Silicon Valley, they will come and tell you, oh, we have this technology that's going to solve everything. That's a solution. What that hides, what that narrative hides, is that a large part of the problem today in the world is that the rise of monopolies, rise of big business everywhere has taken money away from people for them to have a dignified and a human life. Just the other day, and I think I was talking to Professor Chomsky, and he reminded me that Rand Corporation has done a research where they said, this is Rand Corporation. So it's not even, we can't really question it in that way. That in last 4 decades, I think, some 50 to 80 trillion dollars have been transferred from working people to the monopoly bourgeoisie. We've got to think about it. So I think, I'm not opposed to technology at all. Please don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that often technology is used as a way to divert the question from the fact that capitalism is predicated on profits at one end and deprivation on the other. As long as that element remains, of course, within that, we are not Luddites, that we want to say that no technology at all. But technology has to have its place. It's not a technology for technology's sake. It's got to be technology for people's sake. So if China thinks that they need to use that, sure. Does India need it? I don't think so.
So I will go to Richard, but just because it's in context of your comment and what
I have my hand
Darren
up.
said.
I have my hand up.
Yes, madam. I will come to you. Could you give me 2 minutes? I'm the moderator. So just wanted to say what Stalin said in the 1930s in an interview to an American reporter. He said the difference between your countries, this is around 1935, is that in your case, you pay farmers to burn the crops or dump it into the ocean. We put them in jail. Okay, Richard, you're next, please, and then followed by Norma.
Well, I'll defer. I've already asked a question. I'll defer to Norma and come in afterwards.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Norma, you were next.
Then let me sort of follow up on Sharon. Let me say that I concur a lot with Sharon's observations, and there's sort of a certain amount of irony in this whole sanctions now against the Xinjiang province and against these manufacturers. Apparently, what it's done is it's actually thrown Uyghurs off the farm and replaced them with mechanization. So it's sort of a blowback kind of situation. My question is this. First off, there's a dilemma here. One is this whole tendency towards family farming, which to me is sort of the agricultural equivalent of the petty bourgeois. And secondly, the farm laborers, which is more or less lumpen proletariat. Well, yeah, anyways. My question is there anything on the horizon that are organizing these two groups in order to, as a sort of a united front? Thank you.
Let me in here while we're thinking about this. The idea, how do we tell people what socialism is? Well, not so much how we're going to get there, but what it'll be. And the way of looking at it is integrated living. So that we have a health clinic on the corner next to a grocery store, next to a shop, as I say, where my mother could have bought a girdle. But anyway, the delicatessen, the shops near each other, near a farm, lots of little farms that are worked by people in the neighborhood. And someplace in the field is the opera house and the sports activity. And that within this, people are practicing the piano. The idea of all the segregation of our activities is very much because of the control by the people who are deriving profit from our labor. There's an event on TV I've been watching called Clarkson's Farm, and he has to go buy all these huge devices to do the farming on this huge piece of land. And I'm thinking about how well the people who sell that farming equipment are doing. He ends up after a year of farming a huge variety of product with 144 pounds of profit, he said, after all the expenses. I'm thinking that if people actually want to work the earth and want to practice the piano and want to go run around a field or wherever they run, go for all the activities that people do as integrated processes and get rid of the schools that segregate. Education has become a commodity. I made notes, by the way. Anybody interested? I have a lot of comments in the chat. Education is a commodity, and people are forced to go through a process, much as they hate it. They hate it the same way that they hate jobs. And I'm saying, let the people be outside together in integrated manners, however they divide themselves activity-wise, that the children be doing the stuff instead of being made to sit in a classroom and answer they used to be mimeograph papers of questions and answers. That's just not a learning process. The separation of the children. The separation of the children is painful for the parents. They have to learn not to want to be with their children, and the children the same, not to want to be with the parents. This is a very heart-rending kind of behavior. And I'm not saying that people should be in the same place at the same time all the time. I'm saying that the integration be based on what goes on in the world and that people all have the opportunity to participate in it instead of being made to be functioning within a pre-designed form that is not humane.
It's now, more than, I think, close to 4. Okay. So
thank you, Norma. And I would say, can you hold for one more comment? And then I'll come back to Bedo for his final wrap up. That is Gary Hicks. Is the next person. Let's continue recording until Gary finishes and then Bedo responds, and then we'll stop the recording portion. Oh, Mehmet
I also have my hand up.
Okay, so Mehmet will be after Gary. Gary, go ahead. And,
yeah, I was listening to Norma, and what I'm reminded of is that there was a time in there was a time in the history of this country about 100 years ago where many of the working people of this country spoke English as a second language or even a third language. And they belonged to ethnic groups that had exactly the social arrangements that Norma was advocating. And we need to study, I mean,
more or less.
Yeah, they did. They did more or less, yes.
I know, yeah, right.
And the group I'm most familiar with, I'm not going to go into it, is the Tuolumne movement among the Finns. They had a whole bunch of stuff in Massachusetts, where I come from. But in any event, I'm saying those experiences exist in the history of this country. And at some point, when trying to figure out what we're doing and where we're going, we need to return and take a look at what happened with that stuff.
They couldn't afford it because we didn't subsidize it. We didn't have socialism.
Yeah. Norma, I have to get a chance to Mehmet to ask, and then Bedo to do his final thoughts, and then we will stop the recording while the informal discussion will continue for a while, until 1 o'clock. So Mehmet, please go ahead.
First of all, Bada, thank you very much for a very, very informative discussion and presentation. I think this has been one of the most informative presentations we had in a while. So I have one question, one comment. One is on your methodology of getting in touch with these farmers. What did you do? Did you contact them before you went? And how was your selection criteria? How did you know who to talk to? But second, which is a comment, is that you were absolutely great in explaining what a monopoly capitalism looks like. And this is what we are living. But I'm kind of suspecting that we've even passed the monopoly stage. In 1900s, 1905, monopolies were already there, and Lenin is right in 1915 that it says, monopoly capitalism is here and is taken. So, but what I'm seeing now is one point you mentioned, maybe capitalism is taking us back to feudalism. But what I'm seeing is even beyond the monopolization, there is a gangster capitalism that is coming and taking away what it is there with guns and all. And I can give you examples of this even from Turkey, where the gangsters, the mafia is working one and the same with the government, who is facilitating this. What the government does is that it accuses some very rich businessmen, capitalists, like who are dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars in any one of their projects, and the government comes and accuses them of being a terrorist. So another gangster group comes in and takes over their stuff, and they request that the businessman, pays tens of millions of dollars bribe so that their cases can be dismissed. So maybe if you can get into that part of this, where the monopolization is heading, and your methodology. Thank you.
Well, those are some fantastic comments and questions that has come from Richard, Norma, Mehmet, I forget, Gary. I don't think I'd be able to reply to all of them, and not that I even know the answers to all of them. I have to realize I am also a student. I'm trying to learn things. But I would want to end with two comments, and then we can carry on discussing. First comment is that I've also wondered about when Lenin wrote his book Imperialism, which was 1916 or 1914, I forget. 16. It's in that time frame. So if monopolization has already happened, what are we seeing now? And I think the answer to that is very, very clear. after Lenin wrote, very soon after that, we had the Soviet Revolution. We had a communist revolution, which changed the direction of history for a while. And to the point that by the time the World War II happens, which was again an inter-imperialist war, just as Lenin had talked about, it ended up actually being the biggest defeat for capitalism. It brought in communism and socialism all over the world. It broke open all the colonies. Capitalism retreated. It had to reorganize in a different way. It put the social, as I was talking, the social democratic structure, big government, big labor, big business. So it kind of tried to hide itself in that way. By 1970s, we see the end of that process, both because of internal contradictions within capitalism, as well as the fact that by that time, by generally speaking, Soviet Union is no longer in that way a communist country. One can say that. But the bottom line is that that's the time when neoliberalism comes in. And what to say is that whatever we were doing by hanging on to the government, we don't need. Capitalism can go free now. And that's what that's when happened is taking away from the social sector. The killing of social welfare was that the money that was going to the government from these big businesses can now go and seek maximum profit again. So if you actually look at the profit rates, you will see that there is a dip from 1930s to pretty much 1960s or so, and then again it come back up. So that's what we are seeing today, in my view. And that kind of is a segue to the last comment that I was going to make, is that, I also grew up with idea of socialism. When I was a child, my first concert I went to was in Calcutta, anti-war concert. This was on Vietnam War. We grew up knowing that socialism is the way forward. But beyond us, a generation has come who actually has no knowledge of what socialism is. We almost have to make our arguments again. What we have taken for granted, we have to reopen those books, reopen those chapters, retell those stories. The biggest difference between the monopoly capital and today and in, say, 1910, 1914, is that in 1910, monopoly capital knew that there is this ideology called communism that was exciting the workers, that was exciting the colonized people, that was exciting the farmers. Today, we don't have that. Today, nobody has a vision. Today, it's upon us to create that vision, to organize in a different way, to look at problems in a different way, to reopen and discuss what things we knew for true, we took for granted. Those have to be told. So the reason I'm telling this monopoly story, as I said, is Marxism, Leninism 101. But we have come to that point where that 101 has to be retold. People are questioning that 101. They're confused about that 101. I think all I'm trying to do right now, and that's why I said I don't have answers to all your other questions, is that I'm just trying with my documentary, with our documentary, to give a small window into that Marxism, Leninism 101. And in the process, then I think we will begin to answer many of the questions. It's kind of starting afresh.
So thank you, Beda, very much. And thank you to the entire team, the filmmakers who are here, and the one who's not here as well, and to Amit. So I'm going to stop the recording, and right after that, we'll have informal discussion till 1 o'clock. And I want to be the first one in that line, so that after that, I will remain here and I'll kind of keep an eye so that everybody gets a chance. But I have a comment on just your last comment in the report after the recording stops. So recording is stopped now.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Neoliberal Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, @yahoo.com. And the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.